Somebody needs to hand Akademiks a tape measure, because what this man just did on his live stream is quite possibly the longest reach the culture has ever seen. The timeline is on fire tonight, and it is all because Akademiks came out and told the world, with his whole chest, that he believes HOV himself is the secret hand behind the money. Yes, you heard that correctly. Akademiks is telling anybody who will listen that the billionaire, the mogul, the man who does not even tweet, is allegedly pumping his own money into a lawsuit filed against Akademiks, against Drake, against Adin Ross, against the entire Stake universe. And I need you to sit with that claim for a second, because the way this story unravels is about to be one of the wildest breakdowns you have ever heard on this channel. Now, before we get into why this entire theory collapses like a house of cards in a hurricane, let me lay out exactly what Akademiks is claiming, because to his credit, he did not just come outside empty-handed. He came with paperwork, or at least he came with what he thinks is paperwork. And the distinction between those two things is the whole ballgame, so lock in. Here is the situation on the ground. There is a lawsuit sitting in New Jersey right now aimed at Stake, and the blast radius of that lawsuit covers damn near everybody who has ever touched that platform on camera. Drake is named. Akademiks is named. Adin Ross is named. Even George, who y'all know as Akademiks TV's right hand, is named. A man by the name of Jason filed this thing, and from the moment it hit the docket, Akademiks has been telling his audience that something about it felt off. The money behind it felt too organized, too deep, too patient. And for months, that was just a vibe, just a feeling, just a streamer talking into a microphone at 3 in the morning. But then, something shifted. Paperwork surfaced. A disclosure of third-party litigation funding. And for those of y'all who do not speak lawyer, let me translate, because this document is the entire engine of Akademiks theory. In America, if somebody else is paying for your lawsuit, there are situations where you have to disclose that. The court wants to know who is really standing behind the plaintiff. And in this case, the disclosure revealed that the plaintiff had entered into a litigation funding agreement with an entity called Poleg LLC, a New York limited liability company with its principal office sitting right there in New York City. Now listen to the language of this filing, because Akademiks read parts of it out loud on stream and then proceeded to completely misunderstand what he was reading. The document says the funder does not possess authority over litigation or settlement decisions, and its approval is not required for any decision in the action. The plaintiff and his counsel keep exclusive control over strategy, prosecution, resolution, and settlement. Then comes the part Akademiks wanted everybody to zoom in on. The funder, Poleg LLC, provided the plaintiff with what is called a forgivable loan to cover legal fees. Repayment is contingent entirely on the outcome of the case, and it only happens if the recovery exceeds the loan amount. And the moment Akademiks saw the words forgivable loan attached to an LLC, baby, you could see the conspiracy board come out in real time. Because in his mind, a forgivable loan is not an investment. In his mind, a forgivable loan is a gift, a weapon. Somebody with unlimited money handing a stranger free ammunition and saying go get them. And if you win, pay me back. And if you lose, do not worry about it. And to be fair to him for exactly 1 second, litigation funding is a real industry. It is a shadowy industry, and the question of who is behind a lawsuit is a legitimate question to ask. That is not the crazy part. The crazy part is where he took it next. Because Akademiks did not stop at Poleg LLC. He kept digging, or at least he kept connecting dots that were never actually touching, and by the end of that stream, he had drawn a line from a New Jersey courtroom straight to the billionaire's bank account. And the way he got there, honey, is one of the most impressive gymnastics routines you will ever see outside of the Olympics. So let me walk you through his logic, step by step, link by link, because you need to see the whole chain before I show you the one detail he conveniently left out that snaps the entire chain in half. According to Akademiks, the trail starts with a name. Not Jay-Z. Not yet. The name he landed on first is Tamir Poleg. See, once that disclosure paperwork hit the timeline and people could actually see Poleg LLC in black and white, the obvious question became who is Poleg. And Akademiks believes he found the answer in a man named Tamir Poleg, who runs a company called Real Brokerage. Now, I want you to notice something already. Even if we hand Akademiks every single one of these dots, all he has established so far is that an LLC shares a name with a businessman. He has not established that Tamir Poleg owns that LLC, controls that LLC, or even knows that lawsuit exists. But stay with me, because the leap he makes next makes that one look like a hop over a puddle. Real Brokerage, the company Tamir Poleg runs, announced at some point a $20 million strategic investment from a firm called Insight Partners. $20 million. That is link number 2 in the chain. Poleg LLC connects to Tamir Poleg. Tamir Poleg connects to Real Brokerage. Real brokerage connects to Insight Partners. Are you following the breadcrumbs? Good, because here is where Akademiks thinks he struck gold. Insight Partners, the same firm that put $20 million into real brokerage, also invested money into Fanatics. And Fanatics, for anybody who has been living under a rock, is Michael Rubin's empire, now reportedly valued at around $18 billion. And who is one of the most famous partners ever attached to Fanatics? You already know. Jay-Z and Roc Nation invested in Rubin's Fanatics. That is a real, documented, publicly known fact. And right there, at that exact moment on the stream, you could feel Akademiks' energy change. Because in his head, the loop just closed. Poleg LLC funds the lawsuit. Poleg LLC is tied to Tamir Poleg. Tamir Poleg runs Real Brokerage. Real Brokerage took money from Insight Partners. Insight Partners took a position in Fanatics. Fanatics belongs to Michael Rubin. And Michael Rubin's famous partner is Jay-Z. Therefore, in Akademiks' math, Jay-Z is the one pumping money into the lawsuit that is sitting on his neck in New Jersey. The lawsuit that names him, names Drake, names Adin Ross, names George, names the whole operation. In his telling, the mogul did not just invest in a company that shares an investor with a company that shares a name with an LLC that funded a lawsuit. No, in his telling, the man basically signed the plaintiff's check himself. And I need to be real with y'all about why this hit the timeline the way it did. Because if you only watch the clip, if you only catch the 2-minute highlight that got chopped up and passed around, it sounds like Akademiks cracked the Da Vinci Code. He sounds confident. He sounds like a man holding receipts. He is telling his chat that he found out information, that he wants people to focus, that he wants people to look at who is really behind this. And when a streamer with Akademiks reach speaks with that much conviction, the chat does not stop to count the links in the chain. The chat just hears that name attached to the word lawsuit and starts sprinting. Within hours, you had pages posting that the mogul was secretly bankrolling the case against Drake's own circle. That is how fast a theory becomes a fact on this app. But here's the thing about chains. And I want everybody to really hear me on this part, because this is where the entire story lives or dies. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link, and Akademiks built himself a chain where every single link is made out of tissue paper. We are going to pull on each one. We are going to test each connection exactly the way a courtroom would, exactly the way a journalist should, and exactly the way Akademiks refused to do on his own stream. Because there is a detail, one massive, glaring, impossible-to-miss detail, that Akademiks did not mention. A quiet part he did not say out loud. And when I show it to you, you are going to understand why this whole theory is not an investigation. It is a fantasy. So let me tell y'all what Akademiks left on the cutting room floor. Insight Partners, the firm at the absolute center of his conspiracy, the firm he is pointing at as the bridge between Jay-Z and this lawsuit, is not some boutique little operation with 2 clients and a dream. Insight Partners is one of the biggest venture and private equity players on the planet. Since the mid-90s, that firm has been involved with more than 875 investments. Read that number again. 875. And they have billions upon billions in regulatory assets under management, with figures reported north of $90 billion across their history. This is not a firm. This is a fire hose of money pointed at the entire tech economy. Now do the math with me, because Akademiks clearly did not. Insight Partners invested in Fanatics. True. Insight Partners invested in Real Brokerage. Also true. But Insight Partners also invested in roughly 873 other companies. 873. So when Akademiks stands on his stream and says the shared investor is the smoking gun, what he is actually saying, whether he realizes it or not, is that every company in that portfolio is secretly conspiring with every other company in that portfolio. By his logic, the mogul is not just connected to Poleg LLC. He is connected to hundreds of startups, software companies, e-commerce brands, cybersecurity firms, and apps you probably have on your phone right now. By Akademiks' logic, half of Silicon Valley is one big Jay-Z group chat. And this is why I keep hammering this number, y'all, because the moment you understand the scale of Insight Partners, the entire accusation dissolves. Sharing an investor is one of the most ordinary things in American business. It happens every single day in every single industry. 2 companies drinking from the same well does not make them family. It does not make them allies. It does not make them co-conspirators in a New Jersey lawsuit against a streamer. It makes them 2 lines in the same spreadsheet. That is it. That is the whole revelation. Insight Partners is an investor chasing capitalistic gains, nothing more, nothing less. They are not sitting in a war room plotting for Jay-Z to get at Akademiks. They probably could not pick this lawsuit out of a lineup. And let me go one layer deeper, because I really want y'all to see how flimsy each individual link is, not just the chain as a whole. Link 1, Poleg LLC and Tamir Poleg. Akademiks is tying an LLC to a man because of a name. LLCs get formed every hour in New York. Names repeat. And even if Tamir Poleg is connected to that LLC, the document Akademiks himself read says the funder has zero authority over the litigation. Zero. The plaintiff and his lawyers keep exclusive control. So even in the best case version of his theory, the funder is just a wallet with no hands. Link 2. Real brokerage took money from Insight Partners. Okay, so did 800 other companies. Link 3. Insight Partners invested in Fanatics. A public, boring, ordinary investment in one of the biggest sports merchandise empires on earth. And link 4. Fanatics is Michael Rubin, and Michael Rubin's celebrity partner is Jay-Z. That last link is the only one that is actually solid, and it is also the only one that proves absolutely nothing about a lawsuit in New Jersey. You see what happened there? The strongest link in the whole chain is the one furthest from the case. That is backwards. That is upside down. In any real investigation, the closer you get to the target, the harder the evidence is supposed to hit. With Akademiks, it is the opposite. The closer you get to the lawsuit, the softer it gets, until you are standing on nothing but a shared surname and a forgivable loan. Throwing a needle into a haystack and then announcing you found it on the first grab is not detective work. It is performance art. But wait, it gets worse. Because if the math was not enough to bury this theory, there is a giant human-shaped problem standing right in the middle of it, and his name is Michael Rubin. Remember, in Akademiks' story, the whole scheme runs through Fanatics, and Fanatics is Rubin's house. Jay-Z is his partner. So for this conspiracy to be real, Michael Rubin's orbit has to be at war with Drake's orbit. That is the whole premise. The lawsuit names Drake. It names Drake's friends. It names Drake's entire stake-adjacent universe. If Jay-Z and Rubin's shared investor is secretly funding a hit on OVO's world, then surely, Michael Rubin himself would be keeping his distance from the OVO camp. Right? Wrong. Dead wrong. Because while Akademiks was on stream building this elaborate wall of yarn, Michael Rubin was literally on camera chopping it up with OVO members. And I mean comfortable, laughing, jersey-swapping energy. There is a clip floating around of Rubin with OVO's own, and the exchange is almost comical when you hold it up against the conspiracy. Somebody asks him about his team. He says first of all the Knicks are his team. There is OVO on the shirt. There is Rubin handing over a LeBron jersey and joking about putting a bet on Philly through the Fanatics sportsbook. You have an OVO affiliate standing there hyping up Fanatics, smiling, promoting the man's sportsbook on camera. Does that look like two camps at war to you? Does that look like a man quietly funding lawsuits against the very crew he is dapping up in public? And this is not a one-off, y'all. This is a pattern. Go back to 2024, right in the middle of the Kendrick battle, when Drake was getting dissed in real time and half the industry was acting brand new. Where was Drake? At Michael Rubin's all-white party, the most exclusive invite of the summer, and Drake was in the building while the culture was at his throat. Michael Rubin is cool with Drake. Michael Rubin has partnered with Drake. Michael Rubin keeps OVO in his personal orbit, publicly, repeatedly, and without a hint of tension. And we are supposed to believe that this same man, whose business partner is Jay-Z, turned around and greenlit a covert litigation funding operation targeting Drake's circle through a firm that also happens to invest in 800 other companies? Make it make sense. You cannot. Nobody can. Because it does not. Let me paint the full absurdity of what Akademiks is asking you to swallow. He wants you to believe that the man in question, a man who moves in silence and has spent 30 years never once explaining himself to the internet, woke up one morning and decided the best use of his energy was secretly laundering lawsuit money through a real estate brokerage's investor's portfolio to take down a streamer and his friends over gambling content. That is the movie Akademiks is selling. Meanwhile, in the actual footage from real life, the alleged co-conspirator is handing out jerseys to OVO like it is Christmas morning. At some point, you have to put the yarn down, step back from the wall, and admit that the picture you drew does not look anything like the world we actually live in. And look, I am not sitting here telling you the lawsuit is fake or that the money behind it is imaginary. The one thing I will give Akademiks is this. Whoever is standing behind that plaintiff clearly has real money. Litigation funding is not cheap, and forgivable loans do not grow on trees. Somebody with deep pockets decided this case was worth bankrolling. That part is fair. That part is worth discussing. But having a rich enemy and having Jay-Z as your enemy are two wildly different sentences, and Akademiks is out here treating them like synonyms. Deep pockets describe thousands of people in this country. There is exactly one Jay-Z. And nothing, absolutely nothing, in the paperwork Akademiks waved around connects that one specific man to this one specific lawsuit. Now here is where we need to have an honest conversation about Akademiks himself, because this theory did not fall out of the sky. It has a purpose, and once you see the purpose, you can never unsee it. Think about what this narrative does for him. If the lawsuit against him is just a lawsuit, then Akademiks is a defendant. A man being sued. That is a stressful, ordinary, unglamorous position. But if the lawsuit against him is a secret Jay-Z operation, then Akademiks is not a defendant anymore. He is a target. He is the man Jay-Z fears. He is so important, so dangerous, so threatening to the most powerful figures in the culture that a billionaire had to reach through 4 layers of corporate structure just to get at him. Do you see the upgrade? Do you see what that story buys him? This is the oldest play in the book, and I need y'all to recognize it every time it runs. When the pressure lands on a personality like Akademiks, the fastest way to flip the script is to redraw himself as the hero of a much bigger movie. He is no longer answering for his own conduct, his own streams, his own history. He is the victim of an invisible empire. And the beautiful thing about an invisible empire, from a storytelling standpoint, is that it can never be disproven to the people who want to believe it. Every denial becomes proof of a cover-up. Every gap in the evidence becomes proof of how deep it goes. Every time Jay-Z says nothing, and Jay-Z says nothing about everything, the silence gets read as confession. It is an unfalsifiable machine, and Akademiks climbed inside it and started driving. And notice the timing of the villain choice, because that is not an accident either. Who has Akademiks been going back and forth with for months? Who has he been taking shots at, poking at, daring to respond? The Rock Nation orbit. He has been poking that bear publicly and repeatedly. So when a lawsuit lands on his desk and he goes hunting for a puppet master, he does not come back with a random hedge fund manager nobody has heard of. He comes back with the one name that turns his legal problem into a culture war. He comes back with the biggest name he knows. Of course he does. Because that name is not just a suspect in this story. That name is the marketing. You put it in the accusation and the clip flies. You put some anonymous financier in the accusation and nobody outside the courtroom ever hears about it. Akademiks knows exactly what he is doing. This man did not build a media career by accident. I also want to talk about the actual mechanics of what he did on that stream, because the technique is worth studying even though the conclusion is garbage. Watch how he reads the disclosure language out loud. He reads the part about the forgivable loan with emphasis, with weight, like he is unveiling a smoking gun. Then he tells his audience, and I am paraphrasing the energy here, that he wants people to focus on this. That phrase matters. He is directing attention. He is telling thousands of people which dot to stare at, because he knows that if they stare at that dot long enough, they will never step back and look at the whole canvas. It is a magician's move. Look at this hand. Never mind the other one. And the other hand, in this case, is holding a portfolio of 875 companies that turns his smoking gun into a water pistol. And can we talk about the phrase forgivable loan for a second? Because Akademiks treated those 2 words like a confession, and they are nothing of the sort. Litigation funding is a multi-billion-dollar industry in this country. Entire firms exist for no other purpose than to front legal costs in exchange for a contingent slice of the recovery. A forgivable loan structure, where repayment only happens if the case wins big enough, is standard issue risk language in that world. It is not charity. It is not a hit contract. It is a bet. The funder is betting that Jason's case has legs, the same way a bettor backs a fighter. And ironically, of all people, Akademiks should understand that structure in his sleep, because the man named in that very lawsuit alongside him built half his brand on a platform where the entire business model is staking money on uncertain outcomes. The funder is nobody's assassin. The funder is a gambler in a suit. Now, because I know how the other side of this argument is going to come at me, let me steal their best point before they even make it, and then let me show you why it still does not save the theory. Somebody in the comments is already typing, well, what if the LLC name is not a coincidence? What if Poleg really is the funder? And what if the investment world really is that cozy? And what if his people really did move money through channels to make this happen? Fine. Let us play that game. Let us grant Akademiks every speculative inch he wants and ask the only question that actually matters. Where's the paper? Because here is what would count as proof, and I want everybody to hold this standard, not just for this story, but for every story like it. Proof is a wire. Proof is a signature. Proof is an email, a text, a contract, a board record, a witness, something that touches Jay-Z or Michael Rubin or anyone in their documented employ and connects them to Poleg LLC's decision to fund Jason's lawsuit. That is the bar. That is what a courtroom would demand and what honest commentary should demand. And what does Akademiks have instead? A shared investor. One shared investor. Out of a firm with a portfolio pushing 900 positions, sitting 4 degrees of separation away from the man he is accusing. If that is the standard of evidence we are accepting now, then every public company in America is one whiteboard session away from being a cartel. Every celebrity who ever took a meeting is funding somebody's lawsuit. The standard does not just fail. It fails so hard it takes the whole concept of evidence down with it. And let me say the quiet part about incentives out loud, because nobody else seems to want to. Ask yourself what the mogul would possibly gain from this. Seriously, game it out. This is a man whose entire public posture for a decade has been strategic silence. He does not do streamer beef. He does not do response records anymore. He barely does interviews. His beefs get settled in boardrooms and versus spaced years apart, if at all. And the theory requires you to believe that this man looked at a New Jersey gambling promotion lawsuit, a case where the named parties include Drake, who by the way sits inside an orbit that Jay-Z's own business partner actively parties with, and said yes, this is the hill. This is where I spend my money and my risk and my reputation. On Akademiks. I am sorry, but the juice is not there. The motive is not there. The risk-reward is a joke. A man that calculated does not make moves that sloppy, and sloppiness is the only version of this story where he is involved. Meanwhile, back on planet Earth, there is a much simpler explanation sitting right in front of everybody, and it requires zero conspiracies. A plaintiff named Jason believes he has a case against Stake and its promoters. Cases like that are expensive, so a litigation funder stepped in, the way litigation funders step into thousands of cases a year, because that is literally their business model. The funder happens to be a New York LLC. New York is where LLCs live. The disclosure got filed, the way disclosures get filed. And the name on the LLC happens to rhyme with a real estate executive whose company once took money from one of the most prolific investment firms on earth. That is not a conspiracy. That is Tuesday in American finance. The only thing unusual about any of this is that a streamer with a massive platform decided to staple Jay-Z's face to it and call the staple evidence. And honestly, what fascinates me most about this whole episode is not the theory itself. Theories like this are a dime a dozen in the culture. What fascinates me is how perfectly it exposes the machine that turns a feeling into a headline. Because think about the journey this story took in less than a day. It started as one man's suspicion on a live stream. Then it became a clip. Then the clip became a caption, and the caption dropped every single layer of hedging. Every maybe, every could be, every I think. By the time it reached the blog pages, Akademiks believes Jay-Z might be connected, had become the billionaire, is secretly funding the lawsuit against Drake's crew. 4 degrees of separation got flattened into 1 degree of certainty, and millions of impressions later, the original document, the one that says the funder has no control, the one that never mentions Jay-Z, Michael Rubin, Insight Partners, or anyone in their world, is sitting there unread. That flattening is not an accident. It is the business model. Nuance does not travel. A headline that says streamer speculates about possible indirect financial adjacency does not get clicked. A headline that says Jay-Z exposed as secret funder gets clicked, shared, stitched, and argued about for a week. And every person in that chain, from the streamer to the clip channel to the aggregation page, gets paid on the spread between what was actually said and what people think was said. Akademiks is not a passenger in that machine. He is one of its most skilled operators. He knows that the distance between what he said and what you heard is where the money lives. He knows that the gap between I suspect and I know is the most valuable real estate on the internet. And he has been collecting rent on that gap for years. So when I say this theory is a performance, I am not guessing. I am describing the man's profession. He is very good at it. That is exactly why you have to be very careful with it. And I want to slow down here and talk about the cost, because the cost is the part nobody clips. While Akademiks is playing detective for content, there are real people attached to this fake war he manufactured. Drake is named in that lawsuit. Now, on top of the legal headache, Drake's name is being dragged into a phantom beef with a billionaire who has never said a cross word about him publicly. Adin Ross is named. George is named. These are human beings with families, with businesses, with lawyers billing by the hour, and now the timeline has them starring in a movie that does not exist. And it does not stop with the defendants. Poleg, a man whose whole connection to this story is that his last name matches an LLC, woke up to find his name trending next to a conspiracy. Do you understand how reckless that is? There is a real executive out there, running a real company, employing real people, and his name is now search engine handcuffed to a secret lawsuit funding plot because a streamer played connect the dots with a surname. No correction travels as far as the accusation. There is no algorithm for oops. When this theory dies, and it will die, the damage stays behind like a watermark. That is the bill that never shows up on Akademiks' screen, because he is not the one paying it. Now let me be fair and tell you what honest coverage of this exact same document would have sounded like, because I do not want y'all thinking the paperwork was off limits. It was not. There was a legitimate story sitting in that filing. A responsible version of that stream goes like this. A plaintiff suing Stake and its biggest promoters is being bankrolled by an outside funder. Litigation funding is a massive, lightly regulated industry. That raises real questions about transparency, about who profits from lawsuits, about whether disclosure rules are strong enough. And you could even ask, responsibly, who is behind Poleg LLC, because that is a fair question to put into the world as a question. That stream would have been informative. It would have been defensible. It also would have gotten a fraction of the views. And that right there tells you everything about why we got the version we got. Akademiks looked at the honest story and the viral story, and he chose the one with the billionaire in it. Every single time the culture is presented with that fork in the road, the biggest name wins, because the biggest name pays. That is not reporting. That is casting. And since Akademiks wanted to play the connections game, let me show you how that game actually ends when you play it honestly, because the connections game has no rules, and that is exactly why it is worthless. Watch this. By the exact same logic Akademiks used, I can connect Jay-Z to almost any company in America. Insight Partners has touched hundreds of companies across software, e-commerce, healthcare tech, fintech, you name it. Every single one of those companies is now, by Akademiks math, one whiteboard arrow away from the mogul. The app that delivers your groceries. The software your dentist uses. Half the tools your favorite streamers run their businesses on. All of it, one shared investor away from a secret Rock Nation plot. Do you hear how insane that sounds when you say it out loud? That is the tell. A method of reasoning that can prove anything proves nothing. If your detective technique can connect Jay-Z to a lawsuit, a lemonade stand, and a logistics startup in Phoenix with equal ease, the problem is not that the world is a conspiracy. The problem is that your technique is broken. And let me take you inside the actual courtroom reality for a second, because while the timeline argues, the case itself keeps moving, and the case itself is where all of this dies a quiet, boring death. Judges see litigation funding disclosures all the time. They are routine. They are so routine that the lawyers filing them barely think twice. What Akademiks presented as a bombshell is, to anyone who has spent a week around civil litigation, the legal equivalent of a receipt. And here is the part that should embarrass the whole theory. The disclosure exists precisely so the court can check for exactly what Akademiks is alleging. That is its function. If there were a hidden mogul pulling strings, the disclosure regime is the flashlight designed to catch him. And what did the flashlight find? A New York LLC, a forgivable loan, and an explicit written statement that the funder has no control over anything. The system worked. The paper said exactly who was paying and exactly how much power they had, which is none. Akademiks looked at the one document in this entire saga designed to create transparency and held it up as proof of secrecy. That takes a special kind of confidence. And since we are keeping score tonight, let us talk about the pattern, because this is not Akademiks' first time reaching. This is a man who has built a whole second career out of presenting speculation with the posture of confirmation. The formula is always the same. Take one real, verifiable fragment, in this case a disclosure filing that genuinely exists. Then surround it with atmosphere. Lower the voice. Tell the chat to focus. Hint that there is more you cannot say yet. And let the audience's imagination do the heavy lifting that your evidence cannot. It works because it flatters the listener. It makes every person in that chat feel like they are inside the room, like they see what the masses miss. That feeling is addictive, and Akademiks sells it better than almost anybody. But a feeling is not a fact, a vibe is not a wire transfer, and a surname is not a signature, no matter how many times you say it with your whole chest. The culture deserves commentators who can tell the difference between the two, and tonight, that is the bar we are setting. So where does that leave us, family? It leaves us exactly where we started, with a lawsuit in New Jersey, a funder with a forgivable loan, a disclosure that says the funder controls nothing, and a chain of tissue paper links that collapses the second you breathe on it. It leaves us with Michael Rubin dapping up OVO on camera while Akademiks draws him into a war he is visibly not fighting. It leaves us with 875 portfolio companies that turn the smoking gun into a water pistol. And it leaves us with one man on a live stream who looked at all of that and decided the truth was less valuable than the clip. Here is what I need y'all to take from this breakdown, because this is bigger than Akademiks and bigger than this lawsuit. The next time somebody stands in front of a camera and tells you they found the hidden hand, ask them one question before you believe a word of it. Ask them to show you the link that touches the target. Not the link 3 companies away. Not the link that works by name association. The link that actually touches the person being accused. If they cannot produce it, they are not showing you a conspiracy. They are showing you a magic trick, and the trick only works if you never look at the other hand. The chat is going to do what the chat does. The clip pages are going to do what they are built to do. But you, the person who sat through the whole breakdown, you are harder to fool tonight than you were yesterday. And around here, that is the whole point. Drop down in the comments and tell me how many links you count in that chain. Tell me whether you think the forgivable loan language means what Akademiks thinks it means. And tell me if you have ever seen Michael Rubin look anything less than comfortable around OVO. If this breakdown earned it, hit that like button, subscribe if you are new, and share this with the one friend who sent you the clipped version without the context. The document is public. The portfolio numbers are public. The footage of Rubin with OVO is public. Everything I showed you tonight, you can verify with your own 2 eyes, and that is the difference between a breakdown and a bedtime story. I will be watching this docket, and the moment anything real surfaces, a wire, a signature, a name on paper, y'all will be the first to know. Until then, keep counting the links. Peace. And one last thing before we get up out of here. Notice that the man at the center of all this has said nothing, because he never says anything, and his silence will once again be spun as confirmation by the exact people who profit from the spinning. Do not let them rent space in your head for free. The tape measure is out, the reach has been measured, and it is officially the longest one the culture has ever seen. Case closed.